The city of Glendale is now in session. Everybody please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. The clerk and deputy clerk are out. I suppose we've got the, what is your director of planning?
Just planner.
Planner, city planner. Okay, you're calling the roll for us, I assume?
Yes.
Okay, would you please call the roll for us, Ken?
All right. Chairman, Mr. Mayor Kennedy,
Here.
Alderman Bailey,
Here.
Commissioner Seligman, Commissioner Cohn, Commissioner Sean Story,
Here.
Commissioner Tracy Story,
Here.
and I do believe we have a quorum.
Okay, thank you very much. Appreciate it. First item on the agenda is the adoption of the minutes from our December meeting and our January meeting. If you recall, last month, they were prepared until the day of the meeting, so we asked to lay them over. So we have the December and January minutes. Did anybody have any corrections or changes in the minutes? Can I get a motion to adopt both, please?
So moved.
Moved by Commissioner Sean Story. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Commissioner Bailey. Okay, I'm going to call them for the vote. So we have a motion to approve both. Says properly seconded, but I will call for the vote separately on the two. We'll divide the vote so that Commissioner Cohn can abstain from one of them. So first will be the approval of the December 6th minutes. All those in favor, aye. Any
Aye.
opposed? One abstention. Okay, and the January 3rd minutes, all in favor, aye.
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 Opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, both minutes were approved. There was an abstention on the December 6th minutes. Okay, we had one item from our last meeting that we laid over to this meeting, and I believe, Mr. Fellows, according to your written real big here on the agenda, they've withdrawn their application for, okay. That was good because we had a lot of questions to have answered, and I don't know that the answers were ones that would have made us satisfied as a commission. So all right, we'll move on then. We have 11 items of new business this evening. The first is a business use approval. Discussion and consideration of business use approval for Ms. Sarah O'Shea's Goodland Fitness at 7020 North Port Washington Road in a B4 Office Research Service Business District. And I will turn it over to Mr. Fellows for your recommendation, please.
Yes, Miss O'Shea, you actually saw her project. I think it was either in maybe November, sometime this fall. She was looking at a suite over on Green Bay Road. That didn't work out for her, so she's back for this particular property. This is an office building over on North Port Washington Road. I'll keep it kind of short. We've gone over what her business use approval for it was in the past. She's just looking for a new location.
Okay. Thank you.
She is.
Do you have anything you want to add from the last time you were here and we approved your other location? Is there any changes or anything you need to add? All right, and this new location, this would be just north of the Pick and Save, sort of across the street from those hotels. Is that the area?
Right across the street,
Okay.
just
Perfect.
north of Green Tree.
Okay, so we've already had this before us once, so I guess I'll open up to the commissioners. Have any questions? All right, can we get a motion then to grant business use approval for Goodland Fitness to operate at 7020 North Port Washington Road, please? So moved. Moved by Commissioner Cohn. Is there a second? Seconded. Seconded by Commissioner Sean Story. Any further discussion? All in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed,
Aye.
no. Motion carries. Thank you for doing business here. All right, next is item 4B. This is discussion and consideration of a business use approval for Dr. Miriam Boyd Organ's Women's Day Spa at 5215 North Ironwood Suite. This is a B1 C1 district, and I'll turn it over to Mr. Fellows for your recommendation, please.
Yes, this particular application is a new business here for Glendale. It's kind of defined in the description, but she's a doctor of medicine, and she specializes in obstetrics and gynecology, and she is looking to open a women's day spa over on Ironwood Road in the office complex just south of the Bavarian.
Okay, thank you. And is Dr. Organ here? Could I have you come up to the table, please? I actually do have at least one question. Good evening. Thank you very much for your proposal for us. The question I had to do with some of the services that are listed on your website. Obviously, you're a physician, so you're licensed as a physician. But one of the questions I had was, you do list massage services, and those are required to be licensed by the state. So I was wondering if you could tell us, do you have those additional licensures, or will you be pursuing those at the state level? Or would you be hiring massage therapists who would be doing the massage? Sorry, can you bring the microphone down so that you can speak right directly into it? Yep. Yeah. Yeah,
There you go.
perfect.
Yeah, I'm licensed in medicine and surgery, which is for the state of Wisconsin. So I'm gonna focus on more the medicine, which is gentle massages. And if anything else, I'm board. Customers need it more. I have the room to whatever they. Massage therapy or physical therapy or medicine or surgeries. I'm not gonna do surgery in that office, but I am licensed for that.
Okay, yeah, that satisfies the question I had.
Yeah.
I'll open it up to the members of the commission if anyone else has any additional questions.
I just had one brief
Yeah,
question.
Commissioner Seligman, go ahead.
Doctor, is the one, your application with one employee, is that you or an employee of you?
That's me right now.
That's you.
Okay, all right. And Mr. Fellows, all of these different things that are listed on her website, all the different services are all in compliance with this particular zoning district, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. Any other questions from members of the commission? All right, we do have a recommendation then from staff. Recommendation is that we would grant business use approval for Dr. Miriam Boyd Organ's Women's Day Spa at 5215 North Ironwood. Could I get a motion to that effect, please? So moved by Commissioner Cohen. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Alderman Bailey. Any further discussion? Okay, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, no? Motion. Thank you. Thank you for moving your business to Glendale. Next is discussion and consideration of a business use and occupancy approval for Safe Space Therapies to operate at 5225 North Ironwood. So apparently we're filling up the Ironwood complex.
We have
today.
had quite a few in the last few months. Yes.
Yeah, well, that's good. I'm glad to see the spaces being rented. So I'll turn it over to Mr. Fellows for your recommendation, please.
Yes, Safe Space Therapies is looking to locate on Ironwood. They are an independent therapist, and they work privately and separately to provide mental health services to clients within the area. The report talks about their hours of operation. That'll be 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. throughout the week. At any peak period, they believe they'll have 14 users. If you have any other questions, we'd be glad to try to answer them.
Okay, and I do see that Ms. Sayers is joining us on this.
Hello,
Ms.
yes,
Sayers-
I'm here.
Hi, so just curious, how big of a space are you renting and how many employees?
I will have 0 employees. I'm actually renting a suite there will be 4 offices. I'll occupy one of the offices and then we'll sublet with permission from Ironwood, the other suites to other therapists who will have their own licensure that they're maintaining.
Okay, and if you could just, what kind of therapy do you practice?
Mental health.
Yep, so are you, but do you work primarily with children, with adults, couples, drug and
Sure,
alcohol
sure.
addiction counseling?
I work primarily with adults and some couples, treat primarily trauma, PTSD symptoms, anxiety disorders, and then my peers in the LGBTQ community.
Okay. The questions I have, I'll turn it over to members of the commission. Any commissioners with any questions? No? Okay, we do have a recommendation from staff to approve the business use and occupancy for Safe Space Therapies to operate at 5225 North Ironwood. Can I get a motion to that effect, please? Moved by Commissioner Sean Story. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Commissioner Tracy Story. Any further discussion? Okay, all in favor of approving, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Motion carries. Ms. Sayers, welcome to Glendale. Thanks for joining our business community.
Thank you so much, everyone.
All right, next is item 4D, discussion and consideration of a business use and occupancy approval for Sebastian Family Psychology Practice to operate at 6025 North Green Bay. Is that one of the houses across from the Kia dealership?
This is actually in there's an office building across from one of
An
the
office
dealerships.
building and then a couple of houses that have also been like an engineering company and. a
There
law
is,
firm.
this one was built as an office building. It was actually a suite of office condos that has just been, I think back in 2018, you guys decondoized. It was decondoized, but it's just an office building.
Okay,
It's like the second building from Florist, I believe.
okay. I'll turn it over to you, Mr. Fellows, for your recommendation.
Sure. Sebastian Family Psychological Practice is looking to lease, basically, it's the second floor of the building. It's 3,500 square feet. The practice includes 6 psychiatrists or psychologists and 16 physiotherapists, 4 alcohol and drug abuse counselors, 6 assistants or interpreters, and 4 administrative staff. They deal mostly with various individuals on the site. Will be from 8:30 to 7:30 Monday through Friday, with administrative staff typically staying later when clients are seen.
So I do have a question for you. They list quite a few employees here, 6 psychiatrists, 16 psychotherapists, 4 AODA counselors, 6 assistants or interpreters, 4 administrative staff, 6 interns. How big is the parking?
I don't have an aerial. Basically the back half of the property is all parking. So
Okay.
the building's small front yard, then the building's closer to the street. And there is a lot of parking in the back, which you really can't see, but I think it will be fine. They're taking over the whole entire second floor. So that area had been divided up into multiple suites.
Okay. Thank you. So Dr. Sebastian, are you joining us? Is there anybody here from the Sebastian Family Psychology Practice? Well, I'll ask commissioners, do you have any additional questions? Because we don't have the applicant with us. No. Okay, is everyone satisfied with the recommendation from staff? Okay, we do have a recommendation from staff that we grant the business use and occupancy approval for Sebastian Family Psychology Practice at 6025 North Green Bay. Can I get a motion to approve, please? Moved by Commissioner Cohen. Is there a second? Seconded by Commissioner Tracy Story. Any further discussion? Seeing none, we'll call for a vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Motion carries. All right, those are the business use approvals. Now we'll move on to certified survey map. This is for the North Shore Fire Department. And I'll turn it over to Mr. Fellows to tell us what the map change is here.
Sure. So this is a CSM for the fire station property to the just to the south of City Hall. It also affects the City Hall property. Essentially, some property lines are going to be shifted. So essentially on the west side of the fire department property, it's going to be shifted a few feet towards the baseball fields, and then the property line on the north, which would be the south side of City Hall here. There'll be some adjustments going around the town hall. In addition, that CSM also modifies the easement, which goes through the fire department property to allow for egress and ingress to the fire department and public works. And those lot adjustments are all associated with the new fire station construction.
Right, which demolition starts in a matter.
I believe it's supposed to be the 20th.
Okay. So we do have a certified survey map that does slightly adjust the lines for the fire department. There is a recommendation from staff that we, as a plan commission, send this over to the common council with a recommendation to approve the CSM. Can I get a motion to send our recommendation to the common council, please?
So moved.
Moved by Commissioner Sean Story. Is there a second? Second by Alderman Bailey. Any further discussion? All right, all those in favor of approving the CSM, or recommending to the common council to approve the CSM, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Next are 2 zoning text amendments. The first one is an ordinance creating section 13.1.18 home occupations This has already been before the Common Council twice. We had it up at one meeting. We had quite a few members of the public there. Common Council brought it back with some changes 2 weeks later and recommended it to the Plan Commission and actually asked that the Plan Commission will schedule a public hearing. So I don't know, Mr. Fellows, if you want to add any more to that.
Essentially, we can take the opportunity now if you want to discuss anything that's actually proposed in the ordinance. As the mayor indicated, it has been discussed at council twice. For those commissioners who aren't aware of maybe the why this is coming before you, we have had a number of neighborhood complaints in various areas. They range everywhere from just south of City Hall, where there's a fleet of vehicles being parked in a cul-de-sac. And there's just been a number of other things that staff has been able to deal with. However, through the process, it's the ordinance isn't as easy or user-friendly as it could be. And so that's sort of the why, I guess. And then the ordinance is attached to the packet. It essentially goes through and clarifies what a home occupation is, the purpose, general performance criteria, which indicate, the general performance criteria are very, very typical to what you're going to find in other communities with regard to, such items as the appearance of the structure needs to remain as, a residential structure, signage, outdoor display as storage of materials and goods and supplies is not allowed, some things like that. And then there is a general prohibited home occupation clause in there. So we are recommending it go to a public hearing for next month. But if there is anything that you wanted to adjust prior to the hearing, we could certainly do that in the next 30 days, or we can just discuss it at the next meeting. And then if at the next meeting, if there's any changes to this proposed ordinance, your motion would be a recommendation to City Council with whatever those changes are, or a motion to recommend as drafted.
So at the current moment, what came from the Common Council was a significant altering of the original language that was before us 2 weeks before. Our language used to list a whole bunch of ordinances, or the ordinance used to list a whole bunch of occupations that were permitted, and then a bunch that were prohibited, and then essentially said, but we wanted to keep with the residential character of our residential neighborhoods. We've now removed pretty much all of the permitted ones as sort of essentially saying it's your home. If you work from home, you can work from home. But we have listed a few things that we believe, based on the public input we had at the 2 Common Council meetings, are basically nuisance issues. We don't want to have like the cul-de-sac just south of us here. We've got a small cul-de-sac with, I think, 6 homes on it. And like the whole cul-de-sac is filled up with transit vans from a transit company that's being operated out of a home. And we don't allow the parking of that many vehicles on any of our properties. So if you wanted to have a dozen cars, even if your driveway could hold them, the city would say that's too many cars for your driveway. And so that's a business that really should be renting space to store those. So we're trying to sort of draw the line at what is a nuisance, what disturbs neighbors, and pretty much anything else, you can work from home if you want. And so that's what came from the Common Council. So I guess I'll open it up to members of the commission for any additional comments or thoughts before we call for a public hearing next month. That way staff could, by the time we come back next month, make a few more changes to the ordinance if we have anything that we're strongly in favor of or against at this point. Commissioner Seligman?
I was just going to ask for a point of clarification under section 1C10. It is written out as 20%, but then in parentheses is 25%.
We'll correct that. Thank you.
Thank you. And I thought that Commissioner Seligman was the one that edited journals.
I did not read that closely.
Commissioner Seligman, go ahead.
I just had a couple of questions. Some that I'm not fully able to articulate yet, but just to start off, I wanted to ask about the things that are listed there on the generally prohibited home occupations, the list of 14 items that concludes with other uses like those listed. One question I had was actually about the transit and transportation businesses piece, which I did hear the testimony at the city council hearing a couple weeks ago. Is this meant to also to exclude people who are working for Uber or Lyft or other businesses? And does that need to be clarified in this?
It does not. And the difference there is that that's their own personal vehicle, that when they're working for Uber or Lyft, they're utilizing their personal vehicle for Uber or Lyft. The transit company operating just south of us here, they have signs on the sides of all the vans of the name of the transit company. And they've been like trying to park them all in their driveway at night but basically taking up the entire cul-de-sac during the day. There's a difference between Uber and Lyft. Uber and Lyft are fully permitted to operate within the Glendale city limits. They can operate anywhere in Milwaukee County or anywhere in the state for that matter. But it's a personal vehicle being utilized for a business service.
And how does the language that's in this proposed ordinance reflect that?
I guess I'll ask Mr. Fellows, do we need clarification on that?
We certainly could. The interesting part is I would have actually in terms of this as a permitted use, we got rid of the list of permitted uses. So my instinct would be to say, personal vehicles used for conducting business, off premises or something like that would put in that category. So in this case, since we only have the prohibited, what we probably would draft is it would say something like transit and transportation businesses, parentheses, excluding, or we'd have to come up with something, but we certainly could draft something like that. I'd probably want to ponder it for a couple of days where it would actually plug in. But we could clarify that if
Could you draft something and share it with us ahead of the next meeting? And
yeah, so yeah, we'll
Okay.
yeah, anything you want us to change tonight, we can make changes to it so that you can have it for the public hearing. That would be the published document for the next meeting. If you don't like the new drafts, that we can talk about that, or we can talk about the existing language, but with the hearing. But that would be the best thing to do, is then the public would be able to comment on that new language also.
thank you. Commissioner Slugman, do you have anything?
Yeah, I do. So I guess I had a similar question about the number 11, the bed and breakfast establishments, and how that's different from an Airbnb.
That's a question I can't answer.
So an Airbnb, I guess the difference, and these might be things that we just define if they're not already defined, but a bed and breakfast, typically you have the property owner living at the home, and then the people who are staying there are also essentially living for that short period of time with the owner as guests in the establishment, versus an Airbnb, the owner's not there. You're just, the whole space is being leased out. So you don't actually.
Code that defines the uses for these two, Airbnb and bed and breakfast are defined as the owner also. That's why that is.
It's related to that. I don't think I understand why a B&B is objectionable use.
I don't know that any of us discussed it at the Common Council. That's carryover language that's existed in the ordinance for decades.
So usually, I can't tell you the history since my tenure here in Glendale's been just about 11 months, but traditionally the bed and breakfast are usually in most communities, they're kind of allowed in certain areas, but not in other areas, just because there is a lot of traffic coming and going. And usually you won't typically just have one group of people. You might have a 4-bedroom house and you might have 3 different people in there. So you might end up with, a number of cars and that type of thing. So it's kind of usually on the edges of residential areas and commercial areas. It's kind of a crossover zone typically for bed and breakfast rather than right in the middle of a neighborhood. But that would just be kind of my description kind of a typically how they're regulated.
It operates more like a small hotel
Correct.
with
Yep.
staff on site who are making meals and you're providing other services, as opposed to like you get the keys and you have the house for the length of time you rent it.
Right.
That is
and-
correct. I was gonna say, sorry, that we viewed it more as a hotel rather than as an Airbnb. There would be people living and working there together, and you could have people stay 1 or 2 nights in and out and have a significant amount of traffic in a residential area that probably wouldn't be wanted. But it's certainly a policy decision that's up to the plan commission to recommend to the city council and for you guys to endorse that.
I'm not sure that I think a B and B is a bad idea, that it actually could be much more charming than, say, a rental through Airbnb or Vrbo.
Okay. So I guess I would ask, would you want to make a motion then to strike number 11?
Actually, I guess I'd like to find some way, assuming we're gonna have a hearing, to have people comment on that in the public. I don't think that my inclination is necessarily the right one, and I'm willing to be swayed either way.
So I guess as it stands right now, the clarification language we've asked of staff, they can be added without a motion from us. But we have to be basically be able to present at the end of this meeting, a document to staff that gets published in the paper. So if we print it as is, it's going to get published with that language in there. Do you want it to get published with that language? We can get feedback from people at the next meeting, and then we could recommend striking it when we send it to the common council.
I'd like to know what the other commissioners think.
Okay. I'll open up the rest of the commission. Anyone else?
Would it be helpful if we wouldn't put it into this draft ordinance, but we could attach it as a secondary attachment to the report where we could provide you the definitions of those home occupations that are generally prohibited, so that they would be sort of part of the packet. But I mean, we don't have to re-codify them because they're already in the definition section, but we could certainly attach them so that they're part of the packet, just for ease of clarification.
I have more questions.
Okay, keep going.
Then again, something I genuinely don't know about nursing homes, number 5. There has been some discussion in this body before about community-based residential facilities, and I do not understand legally how a CBRF is different from a nursing home. So I was hoping to get some enlightenment here about that point.
So nursing homes and CBRFs, they're both regulated through the state of Wisconsin. State of Wisconsin statutes do not, very similar to what Carl was saying in terms of one of the other uses, that we're not allowed to dictate where CBRFs can and cannot go. There's a very specific thing, and there's actually, I believe, 3 different kinds of, there's CBRFs and there's 2 other ones that have different abbreviations. They all have different criteria that they have to follow. One of them does require community involvement in the formation of the facility. Nursing homes, their definition, we're talking a much larger building, more medical, those types of things. So they are deemed per state statutes very differently from that perspective.
So the intent is to keep out those larger facilities, but the city has no power to control CBRFs. That's what's happening here.
Correct.
Again, I'm trying to understand. And then I think for now, this is my final question. Is there a grandfathering clause in this, or anything like this, anything that falls under these 14 categories excluded going forward, even if they already exist in the city?
So technically, I would say if someone could prove that those are a home occupation that have existed prior to, they would be grandfathered from that perspective. Currently, we do not require any kind of registration or permits or anything like that. So we really don't have a way of tracking those things, and we haven't issued anything to someone. So it would be a little tenuous. They'd have to somehow show us, I guess, if an issue arose that they've been doing it for a period of time. I guess I'll use this point too. This particular ordinance, as proposed before you, does not require the person operating the home occupation to come into City Hall and take out a permit or get some sort of inspection or anything like that. A lot of ordinances are very similar to the one that's before you. There are some communities that would require a kind of a registration type permit, but City Council discussed that and thought that that was not something they really want, the direction they wanted to go.
So if I understand that response, that suggests that the the transit business that is at issue here in part would be able to continue to exist under the terms of this.
Actually, the transit business has already violated a number of other city ordinances regarding the number of cars on the particular space. Failure to register those cars during the winter or during the summer months to be able to park on the street. They have parked on the street overnight during the winter months. I mean, they've had a series of violations already. And under the current ordinance, you can't operate a transit business from the property. And so they're already in violation of, and they've already had interactions with city staff about the business they're operating currently on the property.
That's an enforcement issue, not so relevant to the changes in the code.
That business can't be operated there now, and it won't be able to be operated there under this, and they wouldn't be subject to grandfathering
Okay,
because they weren't approved right now.
okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Technically, they should have rented space in one of our business or industrial districts and parked all of their vans there. And had an office there for the staff to report and pick up the vans. They shouldn't have been operating it out of the house. It's already not permitted in a residential neighborhood.
Thank you so much. I think I'm done now.
Oh, that's fine. Any other questions? Commissioner Cohn?
Just as a sidebar, I have a question. Since we don't have a code compliance officer anymore, what is the procedure and who handles complaints that would come up?
So the code compliance type things have sort of were split 4 or 5 years ago when that position was not replaced. So property maintenance type things are actually handled by Public Works, and then zoning type enforcement things that would be handled by myself or Ken. So if it's a use type thing, then Ken or I would be involved with it. If it tends to go towards some of the other items related to property maintenance, that would be handled by Public Works staff. If with, for instance, the issue at the cul-de-sac with all the cars, that hits a lot of items that are actually enforced by the police department. So depending on the issue, it could be one of those three. It may, if a whole bunch of things were ticked, it may actually end up being the three departments working together to put together a letter or enforcement as a joint effort. So it could vary.
Question is follow-up. What is the procedure for follow-up to a complaint? And you've talked to the individual. Is there a follow-up pattern? 30 days, 50, whatever it is?
So my experience has been most of the time when I contact somebody, usually they're very apologetic. They didn't know the rules, and they resolve it. We talk on the phone or something like that and get it resolved. And usually the complaint, my experience is the complaint usually comes in from a neighbor who hasn't actually talked to their neighbor. And so they don't know really what was going on. So, you know, I had one situation where they thought that they were opening a construction business out of the house. It just so happened though that the person his personal vehicle was a construction vehicle, and he was pouring a pad for a third car next to his garage. So there was this impression of, you know, a construction company moving in, but it was just some remodeling and other things. So usually I would say most of those kinds of things kind of get resolved, and it's kind of sometimes assumptions. The issue down at the cul-de-sac with the trucks and the transit vans was mostly handled by the police department. So
when you contact a person, do you tell them that we're following up in 30 days or follow up in 2 weeks or?
So usually if they can't correct the situation within a short period of time, we will discuss what's reasonable. So sometimes it might be a week or 2 weeks, something like that. I'll usually drive by. If I don't see anything and I don't have any more complaints, I'll consider it resolved. That's how I've been typically handling it, particularly if it's something that's visible from that perspective. If I get another complaint or I drive by and something doesn't look resolved, then I call the person back and say, what's happening. So.
Thank you.
And if you have to, usually I like to try to deal with them in a more casual way, but if somebody isn't responsive or something like that, that's when we would start formal letters and write everything down. So usually the first one is trying to be more friendly from that perspective. And if if it gets more complicated, we'll start the letters and stuff like that.
Any other questions from members of the commission? All right, well, we do have a recommendation from staff then that we call for a public hearing about the ordinance for on home occupations for our meeting to be held on March 7th. Can I get a motion to call for the public hearing, please? Moved by Commissioner Cohn. Who's there a second?
Second,
By Commissioner Seligman. All those in favor of calling for the public hearing at our next meeting, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. All right, the next zoning text amendment is on ordinance amending Title 13 zoning. This has to do with front yard requirements, and I'll turn it over to Mr. Fellows.
Thank you, Mayor. This particular text amendment has to do with the S1 district. This S1 district is found within the city of Glendale at Nicolay High School, fire stations, the elementary, middle schools, city hall, and a few, some of our baseball fields and things like that. The current ordinance allows for a decrease in setback to accessory structures when they're on side yards and rear yards. However, it does not allow that for the front yard. So you'll see here, it's a fairly simple draft change to the text, which basically allows for that same sort of additional setback for accessory structures to be allowed within the front yard. City Council, we did discuss this, and it's here for your review, and I'd be glad to answer any other questions you might have.
Does this one require a public hearing, or does a plan commission have the ability to send it back to the common council with a recommendation now? I mean,
It by ordinance, it is an optional public hearing for the planning commission. And so you could send it to city council if you like, although I have already prepared everything for the public hearing with the assumption that you were going to just treat it the same as you would.
I guess the question is, if we approve this for any of the special S1 districts, would we have pushback from residents who want us to make similar allowances in residential neighborhoods or other, or would it be a businesses coming forward wanting us to make the same allowances in like the B1 districts?
Only place in the zoning code that I have found this type of, well, actually, so in the S1, it does allow for the accessory structures to have these reduced setbacks. In a residential district, you're allowed to have, your garage or your shed can be anywhere from 3 feet. So in essence, your accessory structures in your residential districts already do have those decreases, although they're not allowed to be decreased in the front yard. I don't know how many, I'm not sure if you had a resident that wanted to build a shed in their front yard, I'm not sure the rest of the community would really want sheds in the front yard. So I don't really think there would be that much pushback. It's essentially kind of duplicating this. I'll tell you the reasoning for the code amendment is due to the tight constraints at the Nicolay football stadium. They are right up to their setbacks next to the residential, and the kind of structural elements for the gates and those types of things at the ticketing area are within the front yard setback. So, and they originally came in and had no roof. They were just sort of these monumental fence posts, and they decided to do a covered roof, and that sort of sent it into an accessory structure category.
Seligman, go ahead.
yeah, I'd just like to ask for some clarification, since the discussion of setbacks is pretty technical and not all of us are professionals in this area. If I understand what's happening here, right now, the ordinance is that there has to be 35 feet between the edge of the property and any structure. Is that correct? And then this is a proposal that would allow the reduction of that space, and then the fences or other structures could be closer to the edge of the property. Is that what's happening?
Correct. So yes, all structures within the front yard or have a front yard setback at 35 feet, and the code modification would allow the accessory structures to be within 15 feet. You would not be able to do the principal building would still have to be at 35 feet.
So basically, what's happening here is that they're allowed to just have a larger footprint of the building or in other structures on the property. Is that,
Not the primary building,
but the other structures?
right?
So
There- I-
the amount of open space at the front and the back is reduced.
Correct, yes, the footprint would go into this, to the front yard areas, correct?
Thank you.
These are only for secondary structures.
I'm just trying to understand, because setback, it seems to me one of those things that could, like flammable and inflammable, it could go in either direction. So just trying to understand physically what's happening here.
The high school couldn't propose that the building come all the way up to G Nicolay Road.
But the other things that
But
that
this
high
is a
school has,
secondary structure. It's the entrance, essentially the pavilion entrance to the new football stadium.
so the lot is allowed to be more crowded.
Yes,
In the front yard area, correct?
yeah.
Because they could put this all in another part and it would still be.
If they were
taken up.
building the stadium behind the school, they wouldn't even be here with these
Yeah.
questions. Yeah.
I just like to understand what I'm being asked to comment on and vote on.
Yep.
Correct.
Yep. All right, any other questions from members of the commission? All right, well, the recommendation from staff is that we call for a public hearing at our March 7th meeting. So can I get a motion then to direct staff to schedule the hearing for the next meeting?
Moved.
Moved by Commissioner Sean Story. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Commissioner Tracy Story. Sorry, Fred. All right, all those in favor of scheduling the public hearing for our next meeting, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carries. Next is a zoning map amendment. This is a map amendment for Sprecher property at 727 West Glendale Avenue. It's a planned mixed-use lands classification B1, and I will turn it over to Mr. Fellows.
Yes, so Sprecher Brewery would like, they have 3 parcels at their property. So if you're on Glendale Avenue, if you're familiar with it, their main building is on one parcel. There is a driveway that is sort of to the west of the main building. That actually goes down to kind of an L-shaped parcel. And then there is a landlocked triangle on the southern portion of the property. And that is where a warehouse is. And they would like to rezone just the triangle portion to an M1. So they'd be going from a B1P to an M1. In your staff report, I did indicate what the land use plan calls for a mixed use land use classification. In reviewing that land use classification, just as a reminder, your zoning in Wisconsin needs to comply with your comprehensive plan. This is sort of a land use category that's a little bit of a mix. It's intended to have urban services, a mix of vibrant urban spaces, and should function as a community gathering space with a blend of commercial, light industrial, mixed residential, parks and open space and community facilities. So from a land use perspective, I think this completely still meets the code. So you'd have the other 2 parcels as B1P, and then you'd have this industrial sort of at the tip in the triangle of the property. I did provide a little bit of information about the M1 light manufacturing district within your staff report in case you were curious about other types of uses that might be able to go there in the future. If Sprecher were ever to sell the property. Our recommendation, it's indicated in the report for this rezoning. I think at this time, the M1 is meets the land use plan. If for some reason, I do just kind of want to go on record, if for some reason the other 2 parcels were to decide to be M1, I think then we get a little bit on shaky ground with the land use plan because now we have all industrial and that mixed use has kind of, in terms of a zoning, has gone away. So, but speaking to them, I've spent some time with them. I think this is sort of part of their long-term plans for expansion. They are in desperate need of more warehousing space, and this will allow them to be able to meet some of those demands to get soda and beer throughout the country to people who are thirsty. So Mark is here from Sprecher. He might have a few extra words to say, but.
Good evening, Mark. Do you have anything you want to add to that?
Thank you very much. I appreciate you considering our application and request for a rezoning of the parcel most to the south. It's that little triangle between the highway and the cemetery. It's currently a warehouse.
It's going to say it's currently a warehouse, isn't it?
Yep, it's been a
Yeah.
warehouse since 1953. It came along with the brewery when it changed to B1P, but it's been a warehouse, always has been a warehouse, will continue to be a warehouse. And frankly, we'd like to take advantage of the M1 zoning designation so we can get some better financing and hopefully in the next couple of years, connect all the parcels and have a larger plan. this is the first step in kind of a highest best use opportunity for us. And it will open the door to allow some additional financial opportunities, hopefully, if we can get them to land in the next year to make this move forward. So it's the next step for us. And we like to continue our growth with the city.
The only question I have is if you're talking about, you said connecting the parcels, you aren't wanting at some point to rezone the other two parcels as M1s, are you?
I don't see the brewery becoming an M1. We would love to have a tap room and the community and
Right.
continue to have tours and have that as a viable public space. I'm looking more about how to use the campus and to connect the back of the production facility to, so I don't have to drive outside with the soda in the winter
Right.
to the
Right.
warehouse. I can connect them with a restructuring of that central building that used to be the Brady headquarters. We're trying to figure out how to maybe connect those pieces, but I don't see that as a zoning change for the brewery per se. Again, this is a multi-year process and we're trying to get that first step going.
Okay. Commissioner, questions? All right, so, Mr. Fellows, your recommendation is that we schedule a public hearing for the rezoning
Yes.
for our next meeting? Okay.
Our request would just be to, if we could speed it up and move right on to the common council meeting, we'd love for that to happen rather than have another public meeting. We have received no objection to this. And I think we already went to the original common council meeting before we came here.
Right, so we would schedule a public hearing for next month. So our March 7th Plan Commission meeting, we would then, assuming there's no concerns raised at the public hearing for the Plan Commission, it could be at the Common Council the following week. And the Common Council does not have to hold another public hearing. They can, but for example, if the Plan Commission holds a public hearing and nobody shows up for it, many times the Common Council has gotten a recommendation from the Plan Commission, seeing that nobody showed up for a public hearing at the Plan Commission, and we don't see a reason to call for our own. So we can usually get things moved through pretty quickly that way. We've had situations though where we've had a packed house for a hearing here, and it goes back to the Common Council, and the Common Council is like, yeah, we're gonna go ahead and hold another public hearing just to make sure. So I don't anticipate there being concern. So, I mean, if like I said, if nobody shows up or only one person shows up at the public hearing next month, we could probably get this moved through to the Common Council within another week or so after that.
Okay, I appreciate your time and
And I know if you're going for financing, there's timelines. I get it. So,
and, yeah, every month. and
yeah.
then it goes again and it's 2 more.
Yeah. Okay. Yep. All right. Can we get a motion then to call for the public hearing?
So moved.
Moved by Commissioner Seligman. Is there a second?
Seconded?
Seconded by Commissioner Sean Story. All those in favor of calling the public hearing for the map amendment for Sprecher property for the public hearing to be held at March 7th meeting, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Yep. Next is discussion and consideration of map amendments for a whole bunch of properties that are owned by MMSD in the city of Glendale. So you've got a whole list of addresses here on Sunny Point, and I will turn it over to Mr. Fellows.
Thank you, Mayor. This zoning map amendment is coming before you. Essentially, all of the property addresses that are listed are owned by the city of Glendale, except for one that's owned by the Metropolitan Sewage District. And these are all properties that have been acquired through the MMSD's program for floodway control. So they're all currently vacant lots. They all have deed restrictions on them of what's allowed. The homes have been removed, or in one case, the home is scheduled for removal. It's been purchased by the city and will be removed this spring. And so talking with the MMSD staff as well as city staff, it seemed that our zoning code our zoning map should reflect all of those other criteria on there. And so we are recommending a rezoning to the C1 or it's also commonly known as the conservation district.
Right, so the Common Council has been working with MMSD for about 10, 12 years, purchasing properties that are not only in the floodplain, but are currently in the 100-year floodway. These are homes that when we had all that flooding in 2010, all of these properties flooded. So we've purchased a number of those homes and demolished them. And now MMSD is requesting that we make them all the same designation as our parkland. So conservancy, which means they're not developable for no structure can be built in them in the future.
Fact that they're actually in the floodway and there's all those regulations that don't allow a new house to be built there either. So it's kind of a layering of policies to be alignment.
Looking at the map, I see the properties are outlined in red. The empty properties, there's like 4 of them in the middle. Are they already, or what's happening with those?
So all the properties on your map that are outlined in red are owned by the city of Glendale and the one parcel by MMSD. All the other parcels that are in beige, those are all private properties. And you can see on that map, there's some little squares that are kind of in a darker beige. Those are representative of homes or garages or accessory units. So those 4 lots that are there on North Sunny Point Lane are private properties with existing homes on them, as well as those, there's 2 that are right next to each other at the end of that grouping.
Question is, why would those not be included?
The thought staff had is that we would just rezone it to conservation, kind of get caught up at this point of all the properties that are actually owned and are in a conservation state. And then as people choose, the program with the MMSD is an optional program that is triggered by the property owner. It is not something that we do send out a yearly letter that says, hey, we have this program. If you're interested, give us a call. But it is something that they trigger and choose to do. And I think rezoning their properties to the C1, basically, it would mean that a single family home isn't allowed. And I think the policy would be better to just, rezone at the time of acquisition.
They have the opportunity because they're in the floodway. If they wanted to sell their home, the city and MMSD would purchase the home, we demolish the home, and then it would come before us at some point to rezone it as a conservancy. But as of right now, people live in the homes. They haven't chosen the voluntary sale to the city.
They restricted to sell to the city first before selling it to an outsider?
Well, they could sell it to an outside person, and then that outside person could decide to come to the city and say, I would like to be part of your program. So it's whoever is the owner at the time. So there are some properties. I think most people along here have actually lived in the homes for a period of time, but it is possible someone could put a for sale sign up and sell it, and the person buying it would then purchase it, and they would know that they're in the floodplain and they have to pay flood insurance and those types of things. There's nothing compelling that they can only sell to the city. It's still a free market.
They're all on Sunny Point Lane. And they are all properties that have already been acquired. The homes have already been demolished and they're just vacant lots. Yeah. Oh, we're only designating we would, if any of those other homes were to be designated to be rezoned to a C1, we'd have to go through this whole public hearing process. Okay, so any of the homes that are currently on Sunny Point Lane, folks there would have gotten letters from the city indicating they can participate in the voluntary process. If you own one of those homes and you've gotten one of those letters, then you would be one of those people who could voluntarily sell your home. If you haven't gotten one of those letters, you're not in one of those properties, then it wouldn't apply. Well, the future plan is that's part of a floodway, which FEMA regulations state that you cannot make significant improvements to the home. If you've got questions about your particular property, I'm sure that staff would be happy to talk with you after the meeting. Okay. Okay, well, we're not scheduled for a public hearing tonight, but if you have questions about your particular property, you're certainly welcome to meet with staff and they can explain to you the current floodplain maps and yeah. Okay. All right. So we have before us now a recommendation to call for a public hearing to designate the properties that have already been acquired, in which homes have already been demolished, that those become C1 conservancy. Can I get a motion then to call for the public hearing to rezone those to a C1 conservancy for our next meeting on March 7th? Moved by Alderman Bailey. Is there a second? Second by Commissioner Cohn. Any further discussion? All right, all those in favor of scheduling the public hearing, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. All right, the next one is the municipal ordinance amendment, item J, discussion and consideration of a text amendment for Title 15, Chapter 6. This is the regulation of signs, billboards, and other advertising medium. I think this is essentially changing the text of the language because we've permitted so many of these digital motion signs in plan developments around the city that now we're just changing the language in the text. Is that correct?
Correct. So this, these modifications to the sign ordinance, they vary on a couple topics. One is the changeable message centers. There are also some items related to clarifications to approval of the signs. There's some clarification, I guess, the way we've been processing things versus the way the ordinance is, trying to clarify those things, making sure that it's clear of what the process is, and then added some other language for clarification with regard to, and then also clarifying the appeals and a special exception process. So we clarified that also within the ordinance. There are two things that staff is recommending that are not represented in the ordinance that you have before you or went to city council. And there were kind of two oversights on staff's part. One is as I went around the city and used Google Maps and things trying to locate all the different message boards. I didn't think there was any message boards in the S1 Special Institutional District. However, we do have a church on North Port Washington Road that does have a electronic message center. So the intent was to try to get our current electronic message boards into a state of positive, I guess, what do I want to say, being permitted versus being kind of grandfathered. And then the other component was the sign area under N3. The intent was that it should be 50% for a monument sign. So you split it half signage and 50% would be the so the way it was drafted when it went to council, it said 40 square feet. However, the way our signage process works in Glendale, it's based on your lot size. So if you're essentially on a bigger lot, let's say you're in Good Hope Road, and you have a very big lot, you can actually probably max out to 150 square foot monument sign. But if you're on a smaller lot on a smaller street, you're probably going to have a smaller size. So allowing the 50% rather than a specific square footage is going to allow that to expand and contract, be more proportional to whatever the context is. So that was that particular change that if you're in agreement with that, we'll make those changes for a hearing for next month.
Oh, actually, we don't have to do a public hearing on this, so we can just.
Oh, I'm sorry. No,
Yeah.
that would be a reference. Sorry, so many public hearings coming up.
Yeah,
No,
this one
this
is
would
just a
be,
motion to recommend
this would-
approval back to the common council.
correct,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah.
So if you're in agreement with that change, we would then make that recommendation back to council.
Yeah, so I appreciate you taking the time. Since Mr. Fellows has gotten here, we've seen quite a few, I guess, cleanups of language. So we've approved so many of these signs already, but they've always been under special consideration. And now it just puts them into the sign program, the sign regulations automatically. So do we have any questions for Mr. Fellows? Okay, can I get a motion then to recommend this back to the common council with a recommendation from the plan commission for approval?
Moved.
Moved by Commissioner Sean Story. Is there a second? Seconded by Commissioner Cohn. Any further discussion? Okay,
I'm
yeah.
sorry, can I just have a clarification? I just want to make sure I understand about the issue of how frequently the electronic signs are permitted to change.
Sure.
I think,
6 seconds or 8 seconds?
I think I see here one that says 15 seconds on page 24 of that document, so I just want to clarify. And
Let me get to,
I do know that when we approved the Bavarian Beer House sign along the freeway, we specifically made a regulation of 6 seconds. We didn't want them flashing and changing constantly. They couldn't be moving, like scrolling across. They had to maintain static for 6 seconds. That was what we did for Bavarian Beer House. I thought that was what we had determined for the others as well, because I've seen some of the banks that have them on Port Washington Road.
go there now. 8A.
Yes, Commissioner Cohn is,
Yeah, it is 15, it is drafted as 15 seconds.
okay, he's reminding me that the reason the one along the freeway, that when we permitted the Bavarian one, it was a special consideration. And the 6 seconds was a requirement of the DOT because it's along an interstate freeway. So there had to be at least 6 seconds, but technically what you're saying in our code is 15.
That's what it's drafted as. We could, I mean, if you'd like it to be 6 seconds or a minute, I mean, I'm sure I could find a community that has it changing in minutes, not in seconds, so.
And the Mr. Belinsky's sign down by the Home Depot, that one I think also was a 6 second, wasn't it?
The one that's along the freeway,
Yeah,
I would not consider, that would not fit the definition of a,
that's a digital billboard.
that would be a
Yeah.
digital billboard. This
Okay.
is just for, so this would be essentially, Cops, Walgreens, I think McDonald's has one. There's a church on North Port. I think there's a LED, there's a message board by the hotel, the 3 hotels. Elite. So, I mean, it's really I mean, we could, how do I put this? There is a lot of discussion on either end. So either for longer changes or shorter changes, I'm sure I can pull up lots of articles on them. You're going to have groups of people who are going to say they need to change in a minute fashion because it's safer instead of, as someone's driving by, it's not getting multiple messages. So the longer the time period, theoretically, they're not trying to read multiple messages while driving by. 15 seconds is, I think, given the size of them, and you probably can read the one message, and given our speeds in Glendale, I mean, we don't have a lot of high speed
Would this,
roads. So.
would this apply to the signs that already exist along the freeway? Like, for example, Bavarian, would it be covered under this, or would it special consider?
I
We could
wouldn't-
say from this point on, anyone that we're granting would be governed by the 15
So the-
seconds, correct?
The Bavarian, this only allows for the message boards to be on monument signs. The Bavarian's not a monument sign. I think the
Okay.
Bavarian stands as originally approved as a special exception. So this would be any signs, going forward, or those signs within the parameters, which are on Port Road and those locations, which would be, essentially Silver Spring to Henry Clay, that stretch. And
Okay.
then, because we don't have any on Silver Spring, and then these random ones that are, around town.
Okay. I mean, is everybody comfortable with 15 seconds since we're talking about
I mean, if you,
not along the freeway? Okay. Any other questions or concerns? Can we get a motion then to recommend this language back to the Common Council for approval? Moved by Commissioner Cohn. Were you going to second? Okay, and seconded by Commissioner Sean Story. All those in favor of recommending this new language or on the signage back to the Common Council for approval, please say aye.
Hi.
Opposed? Motion carries. Next 2 items have to do with the comprehensive plan. The first is public participation and its adoption of a resolution and a recommendation to the Common Council on written procedures designed to foster public participation regarding an amendment of the comprehensive plan. I'll turn it over to Mr. Fellows.
yes, so back in 2019, when the city began to work on their comprehensive plan, they adopted a set of public participation guidelines of how that plan was going to be moved through the public process. And state law does require the adoption of that policy. It also requires the adoption of how you're going to amend your plan. In reviewing that adoption of that document, it doesn't really mention a different process for amendments to the code. And so what you see before you is essentially, you'll have a couple different attachments. You'll see the original adopted one, the draft, you actually see the original text at the very beginning, which represents if you're going to create the new plan. And then you'll see on the bottom half of that document, process for amendments to the document, which basically says you're going to have the city council will have a public hearing. And so a little bit more simple process. An amendment might be for a parcel or 2 parcels. If you were going to redo an entire neighborhood, I would probably say we would do the more robust, or if you're going to redo the entire plan, we do the more robust process. So this just helps to kind of simplify the process.
Okay, so we have a recommendation from staff then that we adopt a resolution and recommend it to the Common Council on the written procedures, the 3 pages presented, that any changes to our 2040 master plan would go through, would have to have a series of public participation opportunities, and those are outlined here in that memo. So any questions from members of the commission? All right, can I get a motion then to adopt the resolution and recommend it to the common council? Moved by Alderman Bailey. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Commissioner Tracy Story. Any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries. And our final item of new business is a discussion and consideration of an amendment to the comprehensive master plan. This has to do with changing land use at 4160 North Port Washington Road. We've been working with Meta House to develop there, and I'll turn it over to Mr. Fellows.
Sure. So Meta House is looking to relocate to two parcels. They're located on Port Washington Road and actually the intersection of Olive. This would be, currently there's kind of a vacant green space. There's a parking lot, and then it's an older industrial building that was renovated back in the 2003-05 era. The facility will consist of outpatient and inpatient facilities. It's currently classified as M1. The applicant is requesting the land use change to map 5 on page 52 of the comprehensive plan to mixed use. Essentially, their use going forward will be the older building that's there will be their office type facilities. They'll building a new building that would be an inpatient and outpatient facility for their clients. And so that residential component is not something that's permitted within the M1, thus requesting the comprehensive plan to be changed to mixed use. And then following the change in the comprehensive plan, the intent is you'll be seeing a rezoning to planned development coming forward for this particular property.
We're already in the we've already done initial approvals of this, haven't we?
No, you'll be seeing this a lot in the next few months.
Okay.
Yep, you're at the very beginning.
I know
I had to put a spreadsheet together to figure out all the things that had to be done.
Yeah, yeah. So Meta House actually owns a number of different care facilities in Milwaukee, sort of around the Capitol River West, Riverworks, North Side area, and they're consolidating everything into this location. So they will offer on-site treatment as well as, which is residential as well as in an outpatient. And so that's why we have to make a land use change. So. All right, so the first step here, your recommendation is that that we are we scheduling a public hearing here? Let's see.
No, I have a typo up there, but no, I just need to adopt the resolution that's so adopt a resolution recommending to common council to modify the land use map of the comprehensive plan. They will actually hold the public hearing. Planning Commission doesn't in this case. I just need you guys to make that motion. And then there's a resolution that was near your seat, Mayor, that you would need to sign tonight. And I would just scan that and put that forward with the city council documents for the 13th.
So I had only one resolution that was left, and that was the one for the item before, which was for the public participation plan. I don't have the other resolution for me to sign tonight unless you have it with you.
Oh, I'm sorry. It's after 7 o'clock. I've totally gotten the two items completely mixed up in my mind. I apologize.
And I already signed the one as soon as we approved it.
Well,
so.
there you go. You're ahead of you're right on track there.
Okay, so we're approving the resolution, adopting resolution and recommending the common council modify the land use map. The
correct.
common council will then, you'll schedule a public hearing for the common council.
Correct. Yes.
Okay. All right, can we get a motion then to adopt the resolution, recommend the common council modify the land use map?
Moved.
Moved by Commissioner Story or Sean Story. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Commissioner Tracy Story. Any further discussion? All right, all those in favor of adopting the resolution recommending to the common council, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carries. Our next meeting will be held exactly 4 weeks from tonight. And do you have any announcements or anything for us, Mr. Fellows?
I actually thought Nicole would be with us today, so I was going to suggest that you wish her well. She, some of you may know, took on some different duties as treasurer here at the city. And so with some changing of some staff, and we got Ken on board. So Ken, you'll be seeing Ken on a regular basis. He'll be doing our minutes for us, and then eventually, as Ken gets works on some other things, we'll probably do some presentations back and forth in the months to come. So if you see Nicole, tell her thanks for her time, but she's gonna enjoy her evenings for a while.
We should take on a new role.
Yep.
All right, can I get a motion to adjourn, please? No.
So moved.
Moved by Commissioner Sean Story. You want a second? Okay.
Are we
Second.
playing at Congress?
Seconded by Commissioner Tracy Story. All those in favor of adjourning, say aye.
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 Opposed? We stand adjourned at 7:10.
More stories, that's all.
I know. And these two aren't even related. Okay.